My homage to the square has led me to demonstrate what color does to us.
For Albers, every color has the power to change every other color that you put next to it. What he was after is to find the ways in which colors would interact in the most active kind of way so that they would have an effect on you. That's what he called sort of the magic of color. It would be quite nice to see this one next to this yellow, and so that we could have them almost like in daylight. That's beautiful there. The light is great. He actually arrived at a format of these squares within squares. They are nested inside each other, or one on top of the other. But then he moves the center. So by actually moving them down, he activates the squares. So he's really controlling your vision, but he's also wanting the actual colors not to be static, but to actually move. He creates a form that's so square, so perfect. The lines appear to be so perfect, but yet there is always some little piece of the artist's hand appearing there.
This permits you to look through to this, and this here permits you to look through to see this. When we learn this kind of seeing, then we create a new painting, to see there more than there is.
There are a few spots in New York City that are connected to the Alberses. The one which we're standing in front of now, which was the house at which Josef and Anni had their first dinner on their first evening in the US on the 24th of November in 1933. I have to say, really exciting to be here on a cold November day, which is exactly the kind of weather they were experiencing when they first came here. Here we still have the last of this fall's leaves, and it's perfectly appropriate to see them as he would have noticed them, because walking down the street he would see everything so much more keenly. So I have no doubt that if he saw these yellow-brown leaves against the red brick building, that would mean something for him. Albers had his students work with all kinds of materials, and often things that they found in the environment and in nature. And at this point, Albers got involved himself, and he made a series of leaf studies which in a way are quite separate from his painting, but his use of materials and his use of paints actually all come together in this particular study, and it's just a kind of example of his inventiveness, his experimental use, his investigation of materials, and his terrific sense of humor, which often was subdued under the surface, but was definitely there.
Anytime I see a fern, I immediately think of Josef Albers' fish. And I can't walk on a fall day and not think about making a leaf study in my mind, too.
And this particular study was one of Albers' favorite for the students, which was make a color study to demonstrate the Betzold effect. This student took two pieces of paper, and by creating a composition of black or white squares, overlaying that on the same color, changes so that the color looks brighter with the black and a little duller and darker with the white squares. He was trying to develop their visual ability to know which colors, when placed next to each other, could create the kind of illusion that he wanted to present.
We have a collection of materials here at the Foundation, which were the tools and the paints that Albers used in his lifetime. He used paints from over 72 different manufacturers straight from the tube, and in fact 600 different paints over the course of his career. And so we actually have some of the paints here at the Foundation. His efficiency as a painter and the level of his production, I think, is very much because he was trained as a designer. It's also the type of paintings that he's making. This is a painting from 1951. This is a masonite board. It was laid flat on the table. The lines are drawn, and then Albers begins with his tube of paint and freehand. He had really a master's hands. He begins to just apply the paint in a single layer. And then he moves to the next square about a week later after this paint is slightly set, and then the next one. He used a variety of palette knives. On these inner squares, because of the really tight corners, he's working his way into the corner and always working in a fairly even rhythm. And then I think on this outer square, he's probably using a little bit larger knife because he's got more area to spread the paint. It's a very evenly textured surface, beautiful surfaces. I remember I'd been working at the Foundation maybe only a year and a half, and I was sitting on my back porch watching the sun go down and watched as the tree trunks turned violet. And it was this moment of great insight into what Josef Albers was about and why he committed himself so wholeheartedly to this task of exploring color.
The aim of art is to reveal and to evoke vision. I indicate indirectly that art is not an object, but art is an experience.
So Albers was always very active and performing. He loved to use his hands to express certain aspects of his work. And here was one of his became kind of his favorite sort of demonstration.
But when I say this is one, not necessarily a finger, it is a width. And I put the third one so that the width in between is the same.
Then I can
say 1 and 1 is 3. And that's only permitted in art.
It was another way also of him saying that in art you get more than you see, more than initially meets the eye. If you're looking closely, you will see more than what appears to be there at first sight. He had come from the Bauhaus. When he arrived in the United States at the end of 1933, he started to teach painting specifically on color. Every moment in his classroom, everybody was focused on him, and he was focused on communicating with his students. Looking at a group of these kind of intense photographs of Albers give us a little bit of a sense of the excitement and the attention that he commanded from his students. Albers would claim that the greatest success would be not being able to see his presence in their work, but to see his spirit in their creativity. He expected them to realize their individuality and their full potential in the best way possible.
I have not taught painting because it cannot be taught. I have taught seeing. What I taught was philosophy of form, the philosophy of lines, the philosophy of colors.
Can we put in the light over there? So, in my view, this is the ideal way to see one of these paintings of Albers. Against a pure white wall, a lot of space around it, in this amazing daylight that we have here. Looking at this very strong greenish, yellowish square, we start seeing a little reddish tone into that square immediately behind it, so that suddenly it doesn't look so gray as maybe kind of purplish, light purple, lilac. Some of those kind of effects come into it, which are accentuated by the green. And then behind that, we get this very bluish gray. Again, probably some of that inherent in the pigment, but also reacting against the color that's adjacent to it. This method of arranging colors within the restrictions of the format of concentric squares afforded him an opportunity to continue doing this forever without repeating himself, but at each point, I think, learning more about the relationships between color, which really was the most living aspect in his view. He had this expression, there are factual facts and there are actual facts. And the factual facts are the facts of this gray, and these pigments each have a name. But the actual facts is that when you put these together, you suddenly find them interacting with each other to produce this, incredibly beautiful painting. That is just, you can't stop looking at it, because as you look at it, you're seeing more and more within each color, and suddenly it becomes something that's not just flat paint on a board, but it's something that's a living, breathing object. Oh my goodness, every time I look at a painting, I see something new in it, something more intense, something that I hadn't noticed before, or that I'm seeing in a different way. If you want to stop and take the time, engaging with the work, seeing what it is you are looking at and what is looking at you, what is coming out of the work towards you, you will be rewarded. It's such a beautiful illustration of how magic can be created with the most ordinary colors. The longer you look at it, the more you see in it.
When I achieve that with you and others, then I have made you doing creative seeing of colors. And this is my real aim, not the paintings. And if that is achieved with you, then let's praise the Lord. Once a boy of a friend asked me, do you make these straight lines in your paintings with a free hand? I said, boy, no, I take a ruler and a pen and make them. He was so disappointed. He thought I was not an artist if I couldn't do that by free hand.